A former president of the United States, Abraham Lincoln, defined democracy as the government of the people, by the people, and for the people. Last week on the show, we defined democracy and we spoke with a lot of respondents on that topic. This week, we are going to be looking at some basic tenets and basic principles of democracy. I am Olomu-Agbodo and I welcome you to this special episode of You.Gov. We'll let you know more after this timeout.
Plus app is bigger and better. Watch all our shows with just a click.
Let him have the right to decide what happens with your body.
Watch inspiring, informative, and entertaining programs. You can comment, like, and share. Watch our live TV and web TV on your mobile devices. Watch the big stories in real time or when you have the time. Experience Plus app right now. Download Plus app on Android, iOS, and BlackBerry. Go to Google Play Store, Apple App Store, or Windows Phone Store. Welcome to the bigger picture. Plus, beyond television. With every story comes an inside story, shaping thoughts, opinions, and driving the conversation. Nations, governments, economies, and even the environment. The causes, consequences, or benefits. The analysis makes it clear. We take a close look at every possible angle. No matter the story, we take you inside the news.
Inside the news, showing on the station.
The talk never stops, whether politics, leadership, or economies in Africa. The issues, the facts, and all the sides. Your views matter. Let's discuss.
Join us on the agenda, showing only on Plus.
Government is the people and institutions that lead a country, province, territory, or community. Governments manage the land, resources, and people living within its borders. Around the world, various types of government make decisions and rules for people in different ways. A dictatorship is when one person or group has total power, normally from a military takeover, and they govern through a one-party system. Political opposition is forbidden, and individual political and civil rights are normally restricted. An oligarchy is a type of government where a small group of people, normally the richest, hold all political power. Not surprisingly, most decisions are made only to serve their own interests. A democracy is a type of government where, ideally, a majority of the people are included in political decision-making. In democratic countries, citizens elect politicians through a vote to make decisions on their behalf. Citizens are also free to run for office, and they have protected rights like freedom of speech and religion. So where does Canada fit in? We're a parliamentary democracy. We elect representatives to our parliament and legislatures. In a parliamentary democracy, the political party with the most number of representatives in parliament forms government, and its leader becomes the prime minister. And what exactly is a political party? It's a group of like-minded people with a shared vision and similar values that wish to achieve power through an election. But that's not all. Canada is also a constitutional monarchy, which means the Queen or King is our head of state and is guided by our Constitution. Although Queen Elizabeth II lives in England, she's also the Queen of Canada, and she has appointed officials to represent her at the federal and provincial level. Even though the Queen and her reps have important ceremonial and symbolic functions, our Constitution limits the amount of power she has in our country. It is our Parliament and elected representatives that make the decisions and decide which laws to create and change. This ensures, above all else, Canada remains a democracy.
I wish to make our position plain beyond any matter of doubt as regards the African continent. We in Nigeria appreciate the advantages which the size of our country and of its population give us, but we have absolutely no aggressive intentions. We shall never impose ourselves upon any other country and shall treat every African territory, big or small, as our equal, because we honestly feel that it is only on that basis of equality that peace can be maintained in our continent. When we hear the world crying out for peace, we may receive the inspiration to deal with these intractable problems and be able really to devote all our resources to the advancement of mankind by applying those eternal truths which will inevitably persist long after we ourselves are utterly forgotten. Thank you, Mr. President.
Well, if you're just joining us, this is You.Gov, and as I said earlier, we're going to be talking about basic principles of democracy, the tenets of democracy, and I'm at the office of Barrister Kingsley Omose. He's going to be sharing his wealth of knowledge in this aspect of democracy with us today. Stay tuned. Barrister Kingsley Omose, you're welcome to You.Gov.
Thank you very much.
As I said, we're talking about the principles, the tenets of democracy. So, sir, what can you tell us about democracy?
I think it's basically about people having a right to elect a government of their liking based on what the Constitution provides for. Of course, you know, there are different types of democracies. You have parliamentary, you have presidential system, and then you do have the hybrid monarchy system where the monarch kind of acts like the head of state with an elected prime minister and parliament. The bottom line in all these systems of democracy is that the people have a say in who gets to govern their affairs. That's, in a nutshell, is what democracy is about. I would think it has more to do with the vote, and you find that the more effective the elections are, the more accountable such governments are. Because invariably, every government or every politician or every political party in a democracy wants to govern. I don't think any political party or any elected candidate, any person aspiring to office wants to be a loser or wants to be in the opposition. And so basically it's about their ability to articulate what's going to catch the interest of the people, and then the ability of these people, once they get into government, to see through what they have promised the people, even when conditions are not favorable, because they know that at some point, whether it's a 3-year term or a 4-year term or a 5-year term, they are going to have to come back to the people. And if you have a system that has high accountability and the election processes are very thorough, and the people get to decide without having elections or results altered, then that is what really creates for accountability in an electoral system. Of course, if we were to talk about the presidential system of government, everybody looks to the United States of America. Nigeria also has a presidential system of government. If you were to talk about a parliamentary system of government, you'd be talking about countries like New Zealand, Australia. And of course, if you're talking about a hybrid system, yes, it's democracy, all right, but they have a monarchy. It's a democracy that is built around like a monarchy system. Then you'll be talking about countries like the United Kingdom, where they have a queen who is the official head of state, and then they have a parliamentary system of government. But invariably, the parliament gets to, the prime minister and his cabinet ministers in parliament, who are the majority, get to run the day-to-day affairs of government. The core of democracy is the ability of the people to choose. So any system that does not have embedded in it the right of choice, and then a tenured government, in other words, a government for a certain time frame, because you cannot say you have a democracy and you have a lifelong ruler. That does not apply. So if a country does not have a voting process that allows the people to vote in a government of their choice, even if you say it's a benevolent dictatorship, it's still not a democracy. And I think the basic underlay of these countries where you have the right of choice is that it speaks of a kind of freedom, the ability of people to be able to also articulate what they want. Because if you take a country like China, China is not a democracy. Yes, you have the People's Party that claims that it does what it does on behalf of the entire Chinese people. And yes, China is a communist state, but it's a one-party state. And the people do not have a direct say in who gets to occupy public office. It's the Chinese Communist Party that within its ranks. And so although you get Chinese people who become members of these parties and who have to get a say, but that right of choice is not extended to the entire country. We say typically people have to be above a certain age or threshold to be able to cast their vote. That right is restricted only to certain people who are within the Chinese Communist Party who get to have a say in who aspires or becomes, and it's not like they are choosing between two candidates. It's more like, you know, somebody who is approved is brought forward and then steps or ushered in. So bottom line is you can't really compare, and there's really no basis of comparison, because tied around democracy are also a lot of rights that have to do with human rights, that have to do with rights to be able to aspire to your best endeavor within, of course, the ambits of the law. And you check out these countries where you have that are not supposedly democratic, you always do find out that issues about civil liberties and rights to aspire to certain desires are governed by the ruling party, and it's not enshrined in the constitution of the country.
Okay, Barrister Kingsley, you just talked about the definition of democracy. So now, are there different types of democracy, or is it the same type of democracy that is practiced all over the world?
The press is usually regarded as a fourth estate of the realm. It's in the sense that you cannot have these dynamics without the ability for free flow of information. And that free flow of information also has enshrined in it the right for people to know what the government is doing and how the government is doing what it's supposed to be doing. And for Nigeria, I think we've gone a step further by enshrining this in the Freedom of Information Act, which was adopted in the, I don't know whether it was between Obasanjo or it was President Jonathan, which goes to show that you cannot have true democratic practice without free flow of information, because that is an extension of the right for people to speak. Of course, again, within bounds, in the sense that you do not, every right has limits. You cannot take your right, you know, at the detriment of any other person. But the fact that we've embraced the Freedom of Information Act in Nigeria, and the fact that people do have a right to express their feelings, these are the tools that the press, whether you're talking about the electronic press or the print media, or even in the one that is beginning to play a massive role these days, what we call social media. I mean, you just go through people articulating their views and their positions. So these are all the dynamics, because remember, the whole idea about democracy is in empowering people and giving them the opportunity to express themselves and to pursue any endeavor that is legitimate. And it also has to do with the kind of ideas that they can come forward with. That's why people want to go to America. They call it the land of the free and the home of the brave, because yes, it's free, but in an environment where nobody is watching out for you, but you're watching out for yourself, it takes only the brave to survive. So government's position is to ensure that people adhere or maintain the rule of law, but that creates the platform that allows people to aspire. And that's why America today has the biggest economy in the world. Time will tell whether China, with its autocratic system, although it has embraced free market reforms, is going to be able to aspire. I think the Chinese now have the second largest economy in the world, but the Chinese government is also finding out that the more people are becoming economically empowered, the more rights they are demanding, and the more freedoms and the more liberties that they seek. And that's how recently we've seen in China the Chinese government has been clamping down on freedom of worship because they think that, the more people have a desire to worship, embrace a religion of their choice, then the more people begin to dream and to have aspirations, and those are things that will question over time the autocratic control they have over the Chinese society. Well, maybe with the exception of the UK, but in the UK they technically don't have like a written constitution, but they do have practices that they've had over the years that people basically understand are the underlying principles. But I would say the key anchor for any democratic government is the primacy of the rule of law, because you do have to have a set of rules that will guide the democratic practice. And in those rules you would expect, of course, a description of the type of government, what the responsibilities of the government are, what the responsibilities of the people are, and then also if there are conflicts in the exercise of these various rights that have been given out either to the government or to the legislature or to the people, you have to have a means through which those issues can be resolved. So typically you would expect that, of course, if in a presidential system of government you have those who are responsible for the execution of those rights, which we would call the government of the day, and typically they would have like a secretariat that helps them in discharging those functions. So of course you talk about the civil servants. Then you would have the legislature, who are the ones given the responsibility of coming up with the kind of rules or amendment, because remember, these are dynamic societies, and you can't just say, we have a law set, but the underlying situation and circumstances do change. Population can increase, you can find changes that require from time to time, people having to tinker with the law. So you do have the legislature that has that responsibility, and then of course the judiciary will take responsibility for enforcement. But in a parliamentary system of government, they do tend to fuse the executive and the legislature in one body. So typically those who are in government are also part of this legislature, and that's why the head of that government is not referred to as a president. He is the prime minister of the government of the day. But if you look at Nigerian history, for instance, when we had independence in the 60s, we started off with a parliamentary system of government. The key weakness of a parliamentary system of government is that although governments are elected for a certain time frame, you do have a situation where the government only maintains its authority as long as it has majority in the parliament. And so sometimes you do find a situation where, not in the established democracies, but like happened in Nigeria, I think in the mid-60s, which eventually led to crisis, was that members of one of the parties in parliament shifted and moved to the other side, and that created a lot of instability. And of course, what happened to Nigeria in the late 60s. We went to civil war, and when we had the opportunity to rewrite the rules of our democratic practice, it was decided that we would adopt the presidential system of government, where you have certainty of tenure. In other words, once we've now separated the parliament, or what we now call the legislature or the National Assembly, from the executive arm of government. So whoever is appointed, unless that person, whoever is elected as president, unless the person is impeached in the course of the term for which he's been elected, is guaranteed a certain number of years as either president or governor or as local government chairman, of course barring death or any other unforeseen circumstance. So you do have these certain systems where the Constitution now provides what the responsibilities of the executive are, what the responsibilities of the legislature are, what the responsibilities of the judiciary are, and then what rights the people have as citizens of that country. It's a dynamic, but of course, democracy is never something you impose. It has to evolve. So for countries like Nigeria that have only been practicing this now this is about the 17th year, we still have a long way to go, although we've made appreciable progress. People do have a right to come out to protest. Again, everything has, remember, this is a society that is governed by the rule of law. The right to protest is not any type of protest. It is civil protest without destruction of property, without having to hurt others, and also without having to disrupt civil affairs. Of course, if we come back to Nigeria, over the years, the police have always said if you want to embark on a protest, you have to come and take permission, but there is nowhere in the Constitution that says the police have a responsibility to approve. What it says is that bottom line, if you want to protest, because you know you're taken to the streets, and depending on the number of people that are going to be involved in the protest, it is advisable to have the police be on ground to maintain law and order and to ensure that both those who are protesting and people who are going about their normal affairs, there is no conflict in there. But it's absolutely important. I mean, and if you've been following the campaigns in America, the presidential campaigns, you would notice that in campaigns that have been organized by Donald Trump, you've had people coming to the very forum where he's speaking to protest. And normally what happens is that once somebody begins to protest, the person is walked out. But outside the campaign grounds, you would see two barriers. On one side, you will see those who are opposed to the presidential candidate. On the other side, and within the norms of civility, people carry protest cards, they are voicing out what they want to say. But at no time would you see, the American police or the American military or the National Guards cock their guns and begin to shoot at the protesters. And I know that of recent in Nigeria, we've had situations where in the southeast, there's been agitations of it. And we need to understand that people do have the right to agitate. Agitation on its own is not indicative of rebellion. It also is a way of people calling attention to their plight. And what we would expect will be forget what they are saying outwardly, what are the underlying concerns or what are the issues that are fueling these agitations. And 9 times out of 10, you find out if you engage in dialogue, but sometimes we tend to think over here that to engage in dialogue is a sign of weakness. And people don't understand it's a sign of strength. I'll give you another example. In the north of recent, there was a situation where some people blocked the road and the chief of army staff was passing by and they didn't allow him to pass. And before she could say Jack Robinson, by government accounts, over 300 and something people were dead. That's not, it's a democracy, The resort to force should be the last thing on anybody's agenda. And for crying out loud, the person who walks away from a potentially dangerous conflict that can result in the loss of life is a stronger person. I don't know where we get this impression that the person who has a gun has to shoot through to pass a message. No. In a situation like that, what should have happened was what the people did was wrong. Nobody has the right to block the road. And in such a situation, the law should have been allowed to take its course. People should have been arrested for public nuisance, charged to court, either fined or, sentenced to a short term of prison imprisonment. But what we do have at the end of the day is that about 300 and something Nigerians are dead. Young boys, young girls, children, men, women, and who gains from it? We don't know whether there's a potential Einstein or, Bill Gates or Steve Jobs among those people, but they're dead. Once people die, you can't. So we need to understand that the right of protest is a central pillar of any democratic practice. I mean, look at it in the United Kingdom. They are actually having a debate as to whether they are going to remain in and the other time they had a referendum whether Scotland could have independence or not. I mean, those are the higher levels of democratic practice, and we hope that over time such improvements in democratic practice feeds back to countries like Nigeria, and we recognize that, at the end of it all, we're only interested in what is in everybody's overall interest. And that should stem a lot of the conflicts and the blood flows that have been associated with attempts to enforce the law.
Thank you so much, sir. Well, viewers, this is still You.Gov. We're going to go to the streets and take some responses from people along the streets of Lagos. Stay tuned.
literal definition of democracy is a government of the people, by the people, and for the people. You understand? Democracy, I believe, should not be imposed. It should be a will of the collective decision of the general populace, which is what I believe is happening all around the world. Dictatorship is phasing out. People are now, coming together to decide this is who we want to vote for, who want to lead our country. Democratic system of government in Nigeria is not at its fullest, because even the people's mandates are not actually what is being exhibited.
Democracy is the government of the people, by the people, and for the people. And I also believe democracy is just like a set of people doing their own government, choosing someone to represent their interests. Yeah, we are practicing democracy in Nigeria. As a matter of fact, I think we have about 17 years of democracy now, since 1999 rather. So, yeah, democracy is working in Nigeria, but I don't think people are really maybe getting the dividend of democracy.
Democracy, in a very simple language, has to do power to the people. It has to do with a freedom in the civil democratic way. The rule of law, it has to be the one to guide us in policy making. In a land or in a country where there is no policy, everybody go by their own laws. So automatically there should be policies. There should be laws that will guide the people in order not to go astray on the land.
This is still You.Gov. This week we have a few tidbits that I would like you to see. Well, we always like to hear from you on this show, You.Gov. That's why we send questions every week. Last week, our question was the colors of the Nigerian flag, and we got a lot of contributions from our viewers. We'll also like to hear from you this week. So our question is, who was the first Prime Minister of Nigeria, and what period did he serve? You can send your answers to hashtag You.Gov on our Lover Plus super user page on King's Chat. We would like to hear from you. I remain yours sincerely, Olomu-Agbodo, and I say it's about you and the government. See you same time next week. Bye for now.